Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink, it is time for some Path of Exile discussion. Welcome to day 17 of spoiler season for patch 3.19 and the Lake of Kalandra expansion. We're getting really close to the pointy end now, it's only 3 more days until League start. So, with that in mind, let's have a look at the news for today. Firstly, there is a promotion where you can get the Arcane Footprints for free if you watch a certain amount of Twitch gameplay in the Path of Exile category during the League start period. I'll put a link to that down in the description below. It's worth checking this out if you're in a situation like I was in for the launch of 3.4 Delve League, where I was out of state for at a conference, but I had my laptop with me, so I was able to watch a bunch of streams while I was there, because I certainly couldn't play Path of Exile on the laptop that I had then and still have now. It's just a netbook, it certainly couldn't cope with anything like running a game. The next piece of news is the Lake of Kalandra item filter information. This is really important if you are someone who designs their own loot filter from scratch. If on the other hand you use either Neversink's filter or Hobbit's filter, or Neversink's platform to edit your own filter, Filterblade, then in that situation you can probably mostly ignore this. One thing that is in here though that may be of interest is that it lists all of the various tiers of maps. So this is the base tiers of maps. Now remember that you add 3 to these if you are using a 1 Voidstone Atlas, you add 7 if you're using a 2 Voidstone Atlas, you add 11 if you are using a 3 Voidstone Atlas, and in all cases this is capped at 16. A 4 Voidstone Atlas, everything is 16, so it's like adding 15 to it. One other thing that may be of interest here is that we've got a little bit of information about the Reliquary keys. There are a number of miscellaneous map items here: Forgotten Reliquary keys, Visceral Reliquary key, Shiny Reliquary key, Archive Reliquary key, Oubliette Reliquary key, Cosmic Reliquary key, and Decaying Reliquary key. So I guess you can speculate on which of these is tied to which of the Pinnacle bosses, but presumably these are where the various shiny versions of the endgame Pinnacle boss uniques are going to come from. We'll have more information on those when they start getting found over the next little while. The biggest piece of news today is something that won't apply to most players, but the people it applies to will probably be very interested in this. And this is some major changes happening to trade on console. So for those of you that play only PC like myself, you may not realize that console has had a completely different trade experience to PC. What's happening here is that the PC trade system, which is broadly considered the better of the two by people who've played both, although not everyone agrees on this, but the PC version is going to be rolled out on console. Now this is going to be in somewhat of a beta at the moment, and the existing console version of trade is remaining in the short to medium term. This hopefully is some good news for those of you that play either on PlayStation or an Xbox. As someone whose last console that I owned was the Super Nintendo back in the 90s, this does not affect me, but I'm always happy to see something that's done for console players. Next, there was a change that GGG made as a quality of life change that sort of didn't really work very well. This was a trade change whereby the item that you have received the most recent trade whisper for would be highlighted. However, the highlight was so subtle that I didn't even realize it was there. And so GGG have said that they will work on this and make it so that it's better by the time that 3.19 comes out. So hopefully that actually ends up being in a good place when it's revealed. Next, there was a reveal of 2 more Grand Spectrum jewels. So these, again, are the jewels that you can have up to 3 jewels named Grand Spectrum, and each one of them has a specific ability. You only get it once if you've only got 1 Grand Spectrum in your tree. If you've got 2 Grand Spectrums, then you get both of the stats doubled, and if you've got 3, then you get all of the stats involved tripled. You can use multiple copies of the same Grand Spectrum if you want to stack one stat. So for instance, if you use 3 of the top Viridian Jewel, the Grand Spectrum Viridian Jewel, then you'll get 108% total of chance to avoid elemental ailments, aka complete immunity to elemental ailments. Is that worth 3 jewels? Sometimes it will be, often it won't be. Where I think these Grand Spectrum jewels will be at their strongest is when you use 3 different ones, and you use 2 of them at least that give you specific charges. So for instance, you might use 3 minimum frenzy charges from one of them, 3 that's minimum endurance charges on another, and then maybe your build has no real use for power charges. So instead of your 3rd Grand Spectrum being power charges, maybe you use something your build can use, like 12% chance to avoid elemental ailments per Grand Spectrum. I don't think these are fantastic, but I do think they're sort of okay. And I think that a lot of people will use these, but then look to get rid of them when they start getting much more high-end endgame jewels. So when you get yourself a good Watcher's Eye or outstanding Forbidden Flame and Forbidden Flesh setup, at that point you'll be getting rid of any Grand Spectrums that are in your tree in most cases. Of course, feel free to use them if they're perfect for your build and keep them in there. One other thing you should be aware of is that these are probably pretty much inaccessible in solo self-found. The existing Grand Spectrums are the same rarity as Intuitive Leap, which is certainly not a common jewel at all. These ones are still going to be very rare unless there's been a major shake-up in jewel rarity tiers. and as a result, you should probably not count on seeing these in SSF, even with various methods of farming jewels efficiently. The last change is that Lightning Conduit, a skill that was announced as being buffed yesterday, has had that buff pretty much reverted. GGG realized that it was probably doing a little bit too much damage, and so they have reduced that power. Now, the way that they've done this is they've reduced the base damage of the skill by about 35% over what was revealed yesterday, and then they have increased the amount that it scales with shock effect. Now, someone's run the numbers on this, and it turns out that this is going to be about an 18% reduction in the damage revealed yesterday at high end. That's at very high investment shocks. And with a lower investment in shock, it's going to be more of a 25% reduction. Is this going to kill the skill? No. Is this going to hurt the skill a little bit over what it might have been? Yeah, probably. But really, it's going to come down to how the skill feels to play. The damage numbers on it are still outstanding, and it still looks like if you're willing to put up with the playstyle, which is going to be an open question as to how it's going to feel, then you're going to be paid off for it. However, it does affect some of the balance of ascendancy choices, and this is something that's going to make the Elementalist more compelling than it was before. Elementalist tends to be a very glass cannon ascendancy at low gear level, so if you're in softcore and you're okay with having a fair few deaths, and you want to try out one of the new skills, this makes it more likely that you'll go Elementalist and less likely that you'd consider either Trickster or Raider. Both Trickster and Raider had a fair bit going for them, and maybe even Inquisitor as well. All these had a fair bit going for them, but nowadays I think you want to probably look seriously at that Elementalist. That's all I've got for today. What I want to do next is set up my stream, which will be over on Twitch this time, and I'm going to start theory crafting one of the builds that I may consider playing in 3.19. That's all I've got on this. May your Valobs have interesting results, and I'll see you around.